I visited an abandoned Nazi facility a few months ago. I had just turned 31 and felt lost after leaving the army. I needed answers about World War II, especially the victims of cruel experiments. The files had recently been declassified. I thought exploring the stories would help me find a purpose. As I drove up to the facility, it felt eerie. The walls were crumbling, and weeds overtook the grounds. Damp earth mixed with the smell of rusted metal filled the air. The sense of abandonment wrapped around me. I questioned my judgment. Maybe I shouldn't have come, but I was desperate for answers. Inside, I found a faded soldier's report. It detailed horrific experiments on prisoners. The words seemed to drip with despair. There were mentions of strange noises and shadows moving in the hallways. I almost laughed it off as wartime paranoia. Still, my unease knotted tightly in my stomach. I started to explore deeper, wanting to uncover the truth. The further I went, the more I discovered. I saw blood-stained lab reports scattered across a desk. A hidden lab had rusty tools lying everywhere. My heart raced. I felt like someone was watching me, even though I couldn't see anyone. Whispers brushed against the silence. I couldn't catch the words but felt the chill in the air. I told myself it was just my imagination, but the sense of dread tugged at me. At one point, I stumbled into another room. I found a collection of photographs of the prisoners. Their faces were haunting. It was hard to breathe in that room. I thought I saw a shadow move, but when I turned, nothing was there. I felt cold, a creeping chill down my spine. I took a deep breath and forced myself to keep going. As I uncovered more details, my sense of dread deepened. I found stories of soldiers who vanished after entering this very facility. It felt too eerie to be coincidence. I shook my head, trying to stay rational. I was just a historian looking for a story, but it all felt different now. I was having vivid dreams about the experiments. In one, I could almost hear the screams of those who suffered. It haunted me. Every time I laid down to sleep, I wondered if I would wake up. I wasn't sure if I was truly alone anymore. My skin crawled at the thought of something lingering in that place. I had to leave before the weight of history pulled me under, but I was torn. Would I escape, or would I too join those lost souls? Then, as I turned to leave, I heard a whisper right in my ear. It felt like a hand brushed my back. I froze, my heart pounding. I thought I felt breath, but there was nobody there. Panic washed over me. I stumbled back, wanting to flee. But something kept me rooted in place. I wanted to leave, but a part of me couldn't escape the pull of that dark history. I instinctively backed away from the darkness. The whisper still echoed in my ears, mingling with the rising panic in my chest. I wanted to run, to escape the suffocating atmosphere that clung to me, but my legs felt heavy. It was as if the very ground beneath me willed me to stay. In that moment of hesitation, I heard another noise. A low creaking sound echoed from deep within the hallways. It was a soft, almost reluctant groan, as if the building itself were alive and protesting my presence. My lips parted to call out, but the words caught in my throat. I forced myself to breathe steadily, reminding myself that I was here for a reason. I needed answers. Steeling myself, I turned back toward the source of the creaking. My heart thudded in my chest, yet curiosity pulled me forward. I made my way down the deserted hallway, each step a reminder of the countless souls that once walked these floors. I could almost hear their whispers, quiet and pleading. A flickering light caught my eye further down the corridor. At first, I thought it was my imagination, a trick of the shadowy corners. But then it flickered again, drawing me in like a moth to a flame. I ventured closer, the moans of the structure fading into silence as I approached the source. It was an old generator, struggling to stay alive, the dim light illuminating bits of peeling paint and jagged metal. I shook my head. I hadn't expected to find any working equipment here. As I examined the generator, I noticed a document pinned to its side. It was yellowed with age and covered in a layer of dust. I reached for it and carefully peeled it away from the cold metal. The words were almost illegible, worn down by time, but I could make out the title, Project or Versuch, meaning the experiment. My pulse quickened at the thought. What had they been creating here? The further I read, the more the words twisted my stomach that I read about experiments that went beyond human comprehension. They weren't just looking to test boundaries, they were crossing into the realm of nightmare. As I scanned a particularly chilling passage about reanimation, a chill ran down my spine. The company of the shadows surrounding me grew heavier, almost suffocating. Then, just when I thought I might scream, I felt the sudden temperature drop. I glanced around, suddenly acutely aware that I was no longer alone. Shadows danced along the walls, seeming to breathe and move with a life of their own. I stiffened. I wasn't imagining things this time. Before I could take a step back, a figure darted past me in the flickering light. My instincts kicked in, and I bolted after it, heart racing. I needed to know if it was just a trick of the light or something far worse lurking within these walls. But as I rounded the corner, I was greeted only by silence. My breath was ragged as dread gnawed at my insides. I was sure I had seen something. It couldn't just be my imagination, that s when a loud bang echoed from the hidden lab. The sound jolted me. I turned, torn between dread and an intense drive to learn the secrets this place held. I had to find out what was happening. I couldn't leave yet. Then, I noticed the lab door was slightly ajar, a sliver of darkness beckoning me closer. Whatever was inside felt like it was waiting for me. And against my better judgment, I reached for the handle. The handle was cold and unnerving under my palm. I hesitated, fear clawing at my insides, but the pull of curiosity won. I pushed the door open slowly, letting it creak in protest. The faint light from the generator barely penetrated the gloom ahead, casting long shadows that twisted across the walls. As I stepped inside, my breath hitched. The room was cluttered with old equipment, some unfamiliar and even more frightening. Broken glass crunched under my feet. Charts and graphs covered the walls, some marked with ominous symbols and lines that seemed to pulse with a life of their own. I stepped further into the room, squinting at the faded images on the papers. Some depicted grotesque scenes of figures in various states of distortion. I could barely process the horror of it all. What had they been trying to do here? I shuddered at the thought. Then I heard it again, a whisper, soft yet chilling, floating through the air. It was just beyond my reach. I turned sharply, adrenaline rushing through me, my heart pounding a staccato rhythm in my chest. "Hello." I called out, but the sound only echoed back at me, mocking my fear. Before I could back away, a shadow shifted near a table in the corner of the room. My breath caught. There it was again, a flicker of movement. Someone or something was here, and it was watching me. I couldn't tell if it was human or one of the horrors the documents suggested. That I forced myself to inch toward the shadow. My hand instinctively gripped a nearby metal rod that had fallen from the workbench. I raised it slightly, though I knew it was a futile gesture. Whatever was lurking in the darkness had an unsettling presence, heavy and oppressive. As I approached, I caught a glimpse of a figure crouched low, obscured beneath a tattered cloth. My mind raced with possibilities. Was it a victim of these experiments, or perhaps a guard left to keep the secrets of this place? I was about to call out again, desperate for answers, when the figure suddenly shifted. In a flurry of motion, the figure stood up, and the cloth fell away to reveal a gaunt face lined with fear and suspicion. "You shouldn't be here," it rasped. The voice was shaky but sharp, each word slicing through the suffocating air between us. I opened my mouth to respond, but the moment stretched, creating an unbearable tension. It didn't feel safe. I needed to find out what they knew, but a deep instinct screamed that I should run. Before I could make a decision, an ear-splitting crash sounded from outside the lab, and the lights flickered again, plunging the room into darkness. My heart raced as panic surged in my veins. I was trapped. I had to escape, but not without answers. As I stood frozen, the figure leaned closer, urgency etched onto their face. "You don't know what you've stumbled into. You must leave now." I took a shaky breath, realizing time was running out. But a sudden movement outside the lab caught my attention. Something was coming. I had to know what lay ahead, even if it meant facing the unknown. "Who are you?" I managed to ask, knowing I needed to know more before the darkness engulfed us both. But before I got an answer, the door swung fully open, and I was met with a chilling sight that made my blood run cold. A figure loomed in the doorway, silhouetted against the dim light outside. My heart dropped. It was tall and menacing, casting a long shadow that stretched toward me like a predator. The figure stepped forward, and I caught a glimpse of their uniform, dark and weathered, its insignia unfamiliar. They weren't just any soldier, this was something worse. "Get back!" I shouted, raising the metal rod, though my hands trembled. The figure stopped, a flash of something in their eyes, a flicker of recognition or perhaps hatred. "Who are you?" the soldier demanded, voice low and harsh. I didn't answer. The fear I felt began to morph into a sense of urgency. The gaunt figure beside me whispered frantically, "You need to leave." But the soldier interrupted, his gaze sharp and taking in everything with alarming speed. "You!" He pointed at me. "What are you doing here?" I found this place," I stammered, feeling like a fool. My pulse raced, and I could feel the walls closing in. "There's nothing here for you," he said. "You need to go." I felt a surge of rebellion. I couldn't just leave. Not when they clearly had something to hide. "What happened here? What did you do?" The soldier's expression shifted, and for a moment, I saw something akin to fear flash across his features. But as quickly as it appeared, it was gone. "You don't want to know," he said. Then he turned slightly, as if considering his next move, that's when I noticed the sporadic sounds outside the lab. They were becoming louder, heavy boots thudding against the ground, voices calling out in urgency. I felt the air thicken with tension. Time was no longer on my side. "Please," the gaunt figure beside me urged again, eyes wide with desperation. "You have to trust me. If they find you before they could finish," a mechanical whirring began, and lights flickered back on. The lab lit up in a harsh glow, revealing more of the horrors hidden inside, tables covered in strange instruments and jars filled with a thick, dark liquid. I swallowed hard, my instincts screaming at me to run, but curiosity anchored me to the spot. "What were you doing here?" I pressed once more, trying to squeeze out some kind of answer from this soldier, but instead of answering, he took a step back, eyes darting toward the door. "You have to go now." The urgency in his voice was jarring. The gaunt figure looked at me, fear writ large on their features. "You don't understand," they said, shaking their head, "it's coming." A loud crash echoed through the corridor outside, causing everything to rattle. The soldier cursed under his breath and suddenly lunged toward the door. "We don't have time. Trust me." But before I could respond, several soldiers poured into the lab, shouting commands. My pulse raced as I witnessed their faces, grim with determination. The gaunt figure yanked my arm, panic-stricken. "Now's our chance." Just then, an unnatural growl echoed, low and threatening, spilling into the room, making the hairs on the back of my neck stand on end. I felt paralyzed by a mix of fear and instinct. "Run!" the soldier yelled, and it was then that I recognized I had only seconds to decide which threat to face, the monstrous echo outside or the secrets within this lab. I hesitated for a heartbeat, eyes darting between the snarling shadow outside and the terror in the gaunt figure's face. I didn't need to be a genius to understand that the growl was not a mere animal. It was the sound of something that shouldn't exist. "Let us go!" the soldier shouted again, his voice slicing through my thoughts. The urgency in his tone broke my paralysis just long enough for me to lurch forward. I didn't want to think, I just wanted to escape. The gaunt figure pulled me toward a narrow hallway at the back of the lab, their grip tight around my wrist. I glanced back, just for a moment, and saw the soldier facing the incoming troops, fury etched on his face as he stood his ground. My heart sank, knowing he was putting himself in danger for us. "What is happening?" I whispered, fear flaring in my chest as we reached the end of the corridor. "Keep moving," they urged, tugging me through a heavy door marked with faded warnings. We stumbled into a dark room filled with cold, metallic shelves stacked with bodies. A knot of horror twisted in my stomach. They were wrapped in white cloth, as if they were simply sleeping. But something told me they were beyond sleep that I swallowed the bile rising in my throat. "Is this what they did?" I breathed, voice cracking. "What were the experiments?" The gaunt figure trembled beside me. "Look, we don't have time to talk about this. Whatever is coming, it's connected to the lab. We need to keep moving." I nodded, my heart racing again as I spotted a door on the opposite wall. "What is that?" I asked, gesturing toward it. "A way out, hopefully." Their response was clipped, but the urgency in their eyes told me they weren't convinced. "I can't just leave." The idea of abandoning the truth clawed at me. "There has to be answers. Answers might get you killed." They shot back, fear lining their words. "We don't know what will happen if it finds us." Then the growl erupted again, this time louder and closer. The walls seemed to vibrate under its weight. "We have to go." They propelled me forward, and I stumbled into the next room. It was small but filled with strange machinery. Flickering screens displayed incomprehensible data. I could see body heat signatures moving close, too close. "Are they tracking us?" "Not yet," the figure panted, glancing back at the door. "But they will." I could see a small window at the far end, the last flicker of daylight spilling through. "We can climb out," I shouted, hope igniting within me, but just as we reached it, the heavy door behind us blasted open. The soldier had failed to hold back the horde barreling through, their faces contorted with rage and urgency. "No. Get down." The soldier barked, eyes wild. Then everything went dark as the flickering lights above us cut out, shrouding us in an impenetrable black. I felt a heavy thump against the ground, my heart racing as chaos erupted around me. The darkness swallowed any sense of direction. My palms were clammy against the cold, hard floor. My mind raced, but there was no time to dwell on that. I had to move. "Stay low," the gaunt figure hissed beside me. I scrambled to my hands and knees, adrenaline surging through me. The muffled sounds of shouting and violence echoed through the room. I could hear the soldier's voice, sharper now, interspersed with grunts and the deep growl that had haunted us. "Get away from them. You want to get them." I winced at the ferocity of his words. He had thrown himself into danger for us, and it terrified me. "Which way?" I whispered, firming my grip on the figure's arm. The darkness felt alive, like something was watching, waiting. "Follow me," they replied, low and urgent. We crawled toward the far wall away from the chaos. With every sound of struggle behind us, I felt that knot of horror tighten in my stomach. I couldn't shake off the feeling that the growl was not just a byproduct of the fray but something far more sinister. The air was thick with desperation, and a chill ran down my spine that we reached a door that was slightly ajar, light barely spilling through the gap like a wounded beacon. I pushed it open just enough for us to slip inside. The room beyond was different. It smelled like burnt metal and chemical residue. The faint hum of machinery buzzed in the distance, almost comforting in its normality. "What is this place?" I gasped, realizing we had entered a control room of sorts, filled with screens and machinery. Most were dark, but one flickered to life, illuminating a wall covered in cryptic symbols and more horrifying images. "The heart of it," my companion murmured, aghast. They were monitoring the experiments here. I stepped closer to the screen. A haze of static cleared, revealing a live feed of the area we had just left. Just beyond the threshold stood a hulking figure cloaked in shadow. It was massive, something that should not exist. My breath hitched. "Is that?" I began, but the gaunt figure interrupted me. It's a manifestation of their experiments. We can't stay here. They tugged at my arm again, but all I could do was stare, my mind racing with the implications. Are you telling me they succeeded? I was gripped by the need to know the truth. That was when the power fluctuated, and the screen shifted again. I saw the soldier facing off against the creature, his defiance clear even in the flickering light. We have to help him. I cried, desperation clenching my throat. No. The figure eyeing the screens warned. If we go out there, we'll only become prey. We need to find another way. Just then, I heard the first crackle of static burst from the control panel, then loud alarms sliced through the quiet. The lights pulsed back on, but with them came a deeper shadow the creature had broken through. Run! I shouted, grabbing the gaunt figure's wrist as we bolted for the opposite exit. But even as we fled, I couldn't shake the image of the soldier. Something in me screamed that we weren't far enough away. The truth had never seemed so dangerous, and it settled uneasily in my chest. We burst through the door just in time as the wall behind us seemed to give way, a brute force charged through the rubble, focused on us. I froze for just a moment, staring into the creature's glowing eyes, and dread washed over me as I realized the escape might be far worse than the nightmare we were leaving behind. We tore down a narrow corridor, the sharp clanging of alarms echoing behind us. My feet felt heavy, like they were glued to the ground. I glanced over my shoulder just once, catching a glimpse of an enormous shadow as it plowed through debris, intent on our escape. He's right behind us. I gasped, panic electrifying my veins. Keep moving. My companion urged, yanking me forward. Their grip was fierce, yet the urgency in their voice propelled my legs faster. We needed to find somewhere safe, but in the madness, all I could think about was the soldier, battling something unnatural, something we had no chance against. We emerged into a larger room, seemingly abandoned. Flickering lights overhead cast long shadows across the floor. I scanned the area, searching for a weapon, an exit, anything that could help. Over there. I pointed to a door at the far end of the room. We have to get through. But even as we rushed toward it, I heard it again, the growl. It rumbled like thunder, resonating off the cold walls. Get down! My companion shouted and dove behind a large console. I followed suit, heart pounding as I squeezed myself into the small space. The growl intensified. I dared a glance around the edge, horrified. The creature was now filling the doorway, a mass of muscle and shadow. I had never seen anything so grotesque. Its eyes glowed with a terrifying hunger. It's searching for us, I whispered, fear knotting in my chest. We can't stay here. We need to stall it, they replied, their voice steady despite the chaos. Stalling it? The thought seemed absurd. We were outmatched. But before I could voice my concerns, my companion reached into a bag slung over their shoulder and pulled out a small device, a strange contraption filled with buttons and blinking lights. What is that? I asked, my curiosity piqued amidst the fear. A remote, they said. It can disrupt the facility's power systems. If we create enough of a diversion, we might be able to slip past. The alarms continued to blare, but the creature's focus was unwavering. As it advanced, every instinct screamed for me to run. Do it! I urged, swiping my hand across the floor to steady myself. We don't have much time. My companion pressed a button, and the deteriorating lights overhead flickered violently before a loud crash echoed through the room. The creature recoiled, startled by the sudden change. Now! They shouted, and we sprinted for the door before it could regain its focus. I felt the creature's hot breath as we slipped past, adrenaline coursing through my body. We tumbled into a dimly lit passage, the sound of our footsteps drowned out by the shrill alarms behind us. But the moment of relief was short-lived. The passage split ahead. My heart sank as I faced the decision. Left or right? I blurted, my mind racing. Right. It leads to an old maintenance route, they urged, still clutching the device tightly. I nodded, and we darted down the right hallway. Everything felt surreal, the chaos, the soldier's bravery, and the image of that monstrous creature. But before I could process it all, the air shifted. I could see a faint glow ahead, pulsing rhythmically. "What is that?" I whispered, a sense of dread creeping back in. "Only one way to find out," my companion replied, though their tone reflected the same doubt I felt. With the threat of that creature still chasing us, we moved toward the light, unsure of what awaited us. But every step brought us closer to a truth I feared might be worse than the nightmares already chasing us. We approached the glow, anxiety curling in my stomach like a serpent. The light spilled into the corridor, illuminating walls painted with strange symbols I couldn't decipher. I slowed my pace, a sense of foreboding washing over me. "What is this place?" I asked, eyes wide as we stepped into the luminous chamber. "Part of the old facility, I think," my companion replied, squinting at the overwhelming brightness. "They must have been conducting some kind of experiments here." I looked around, taking in the bizarre array of equipment, jars filled with murky liquid, devices with wires snaking in tangled messes. But one thing stood out. In the center of the room was a large screen, flickering to life. The images displayed were both captivating and horrifying, sketches of creatures, scientific notations, and vague references to Project X. "What are they planning?" I barely whispered, dread making my voice quaver. "I don't know," they said. Their brow furrowed as they fell quiet, fixated on the screen. Then, it happened. The screen flickered, and an audio clip began to play. A voice, cold and clinical, echoed in the chamber. "Subject 47 is showing highly unfavorable responses. Control measures must be enhanced." What are they talking about? I glanced at my companion, who looked as unsettled as I felt. "I think they were experimenting with." They was interrupted by the sudden screech of metal on metal. A door we hadn't noticed swung open on the far side of the room. My heart raced. "What now?" "Hide!" they hissed, pushing me behind a row of metallic crates just as a figure stepped into the light. It was a man in a lab coat, eyes wide with panic. He moved quickly, glancing over his shoulder as if something hunted him. I risked a peek and caught a glimpse of fear etched deep into his features. "Get out of here!" he shouted, his voice raspy. "It's still coming. You have to leave now." "What's coming?" I whispered, panic rising once again. But before he could respond, the creature emerged from the hallway behind him. It wasn't just any beast. It was the same shadowy monster we had fled. The light showcased its true form, a grotesque amalgamation of muscle and terror. It lunged forward, and the scientist stumbled back, fear overtaking him. My blood ran cold. We weren't just being chased, they had been creating nightmares in this facility. The alarms blared incessantly, but the chaos of our own survival muffled everything else. "Move!" I shouted, pulling my companion back as the creatures closed in. The scientist was trapped, and there was nothing we could do for him. We couldn't allow ourselves to share his fate. We ducked behind the crates as the creature's growls filled the room. I felt my heart pounding in my throat, every instinct screaming at me to run. "What do we do?" I breathed, anxiety pooling at the base of my stomach. "We have to find another way out," they replied, eyes darting around wildly. "Maybe their SA service hatch or something." Just then, I noticed a slight shimmer above us, an air vent. I bit my lip, trembling with uncertainty. "Can you boost me up?" I asked urgently, trying to keep my voice steady. Before they could answer, the scientist's cry pierced through the chamber, high-pitched and desperate. The creature was upon him. I squeezed my eyes shut, shoving the horror away. "Now!" I urged, heart racing. With a fierce determination, we took off toward the vent. The urgency was palpable, but the growls behind us drove us faster. As my companion lifted me, I caught one last look. The creature had claimed its prey. And then everything went dark as we pulled ourselves into the vent, the din of chaos behind us fading into distant echoes. I crawled through the vent, the metal scraping against my skin. The smell of oil and dust filled my lungs, making it hard to breathe. My heart pounded in my chest, a constant reminder of the chaos that lurked below. "Are you okay?" my companion whispered, following closely behind me. "Yeah," I managed to reply, though I could feel my legs shaking. We moved as quietly as we could, the darkness closing in around us. I clenched my teeth, trying to focus on putting one hand in front of the other. Just then, I heard a low rumble echo from the chamber we had just fled. It sent a shiver down my spine. The creature hadn't given up. We reached a junction in the vent. Dozens of pathways branched off in different directions, like a twisted maze. Panic surged through me again. "Which way do we go?" "Let's try left," my companion suggested, pointing down one of the narrower ducts. I nodded, hoping they were right. We crawled through the vent, the metal crisscrossing overhead casting shadows that danced as we moved. Thumping echoes sounded behind us, and I could only imagine what was racing through the facility. My stomach turned with every sound. After what felt like forever, we stopped in front of a grate. Light streamed through, illuminating a small room below us. I held my breath, trying to listen. "Do you see anyone?" I asked, straining to peek through the bars of the grate. "I don't know, it looks empty," my companion replied, tension evident in their voice. "Should we drop down?" "Wait," they said, frowning as they looked around. "We need to be sure it's safe." I nodded but could feel my body tensing again. My mind raced with images of the creature, the abandoned laboratory, the frantic scientist who begged us to escape. I shuddered. Then I noticed something in the corner of the room below a desk with a computer. I pointed it out, excitement bubbling within me. We might find answers there. They could be critical, they agreed, lifting a hand to cover the grate. "Let me go first." With a nod, I watched as they carefully pried the grate off and dropped down into the room, landing with a soft thud. I followed closely, heart racing with both fear and anticipation. The room was stark white and sterile, nothing like the chaos of the chamber we had just escaped. Papers littered the desk, and the computer screen flickered ominously. I glanced over my shoulder. There was no sign of the creature yet. "Look at this," my companion said, sifting through the documents. "It's all about the experiment subjects, tests, everything." I approached the desk, peering over their shoulder. My eyes widened as I read the names of those involved. This was bigger than we could have imagined. They were experimenting on people. What were they trying to achieve? Before we could digest the implications, a loud crash echoed from outside the room. The noise seemed to rumble through the floor beneath us, sending adrenaline surging through my veins. "Quick, we have to hide!" I exclaimed, my mind racing. We ducked behind the desk just as the door burst open. We held our breath, hearts pounding, praying it wasn't what we thought it would be. But when I caught a glimpse of dark claws and a glinting eye, I realized it was only the beginning. The air shifted in the room, electric with fear and urgency. I pressed myself closer to the desk, watching as the creature moved its form, a grotesque silhouette illuminated by flickering lights. It prowled like a predator, seeking its prey. I felt my heart pounding in my throat, the panic threatening to drown me. Suddenly, the computer screen flared brighter, casting an eerie glow on everything around us. My companion glanced at me, wide-eyed and fearful. "We need to make a plan, we can't stay here," they whispered urgently. The creature's growls reverberated through the walls, blending with the thudding of my heart. "Should we try to shut it down?" I breathed, pointing toward the computer. "Maybe it could give us an advantage." My mind raced. We might find something useful about the creature, or how to escape. "Okay," they nodded, creeping toward the screen, eyes darting nervously toward the door. The last thing we needed was to run into that monster head-on again. With shaking hands, I began typing, hoping against hope that the system was still functional. The screen pulsed, loading information at an almost agonizingly slow pace until glimpses of familiar horrors blanketed the display that I swung back around to work faster, the whispers of data running through my mind. It says here they were experimenting to merge human and animal traits, I murmured, fear coding every word. They were trying to create something, controllable. My companion's breath caught in their throat. Controllable? Before I could answer, the creature let out a roar that made the entire room shake. It was like a physical force, sending a shockwave through my body. I froze, fear wrapping around my chest as the sound echoed. It's coming closer, I whispered, a knot of terror forming in my stomach. Just a little more. My companion urged. I looked back at the data scrolling across the screen, where a line caught my eye. Experimental subjects are to be monitored for abnormal behavioral transformations. Results suggest heightened aggression and unpredictability. The implications crashed over me like icy water. This creature wasn't just a mistake, it was a result of twisted ambition. We need to destroy this, I whispered, meeting my companion's eyes, the urgency combining with determination. We have to prevent others from creating this horror again. Are you sure? What if I'd rather take that risk than let it loose again, I said, fear stealing my resolve. I turned back to the screen, my fingers poised over the keyboard, my heart beating a frantic rhythm as time slipped away. We need to overload the system. If we can reset everything, maybe it will shut down whatever they did. Something heavy crashed against the door behind us, echoing through the room. Hurry, my companion urged, glancing nervously back as darkness loomed just outside. I started typing, fingers flying over the keyboard. Lines of code spilled across the screen, warnings flashing as I pushed the system to its limits. The creature howled again, more forcefully this time, shaking the door as it sought to break through. You really think this will work? They asked, voice quaking with fear. It has to, I replied, desperation lacing every word. We need to buy ourselves time. With one final keystroke, I hit enter. Instantly, alarms blared throughout the room, causing me to wince. The display flickered violently, warnings cascading before my eyes. It was working, but with that came chaos. I could feel the rush of adrenaline mixed with dread. Now! I yelled, grabbing my companion's arm. Together we bolted away from the desk toward the back wall, searching for an exit. The beast's growls were accompanied by deep rumbles of anger as it battered against the door. The alarms fed our haste as we frantically searched. There! My companion shouted, pointing toward another door at the far end of the small room. I barely hesitated before sprinting for it, every instinct urging me to keep moving. Don't look back! I shouted, pushing through the door just before a loud crash rocked the room. We emerged into a corridor that opened wide, leading us away from the chaos behind. Go! I urged, fear driving my feet harder against the cold floor. We dashed down the hallway, hearts racing, the alarms a dissonant cacophony behind us, but before we could bask in any semblance of safety, I felt the air shift. Shadows danced across the walls, dark tendrils creeping towards us as we pressed on. What now? My companion gasped, breathless. I don't know. I strained to answer, desperately grasping for hope. Every instinct screamed for escape, but the weight of what we had seen clung to me, a heavy shroud I couldn't shake off. You have to leave, take this. My companion suddenly fished out a small device, a sort of remote. If I don't make it, at least destroy this place. I can't let them keep doing what they've done. No. We can make it together, but they cut me off. There's no time. Go. Their voice came out sharp, the urgency forcing me to reconsider. Heart sinking, I nodded, clutching the device tightly against my chest. I promise, I whispered as I reluctantly pushed myself away, hurrying down the corridor. I could barely hear their voice over the roar of the alarms. In that last moment, I could feel the desperation igniting in their voice. Remember what you saw by the screens. You have to stop this. With one last glance, I bolted forward, the dread mingling with hope. As I ran, I could feel the weight of our encounter, of everything that had happened behind me. I rushed through the halls, incessant alarms echoing behind me. The world faded into a blur inside my mind, chaos reigned. Shadows darted between flickering bulbs, the walls seemingly alive with a dreadful hunger. Finally, I spotted a potential exit just ahead, more light, more freedom. Almost there. I encouraged myself, lungs burning. I reached for the door handle and pushed, feeling a rush of cool air blow in my face as it creaked open, but as I stepped outside, the outside world met me with its eerie silence, the facility looming ominously behind me. I glanced back, heart racing with uncertainty. Whatever escape I had found felt thin and fragile that I moved away, uncertainty swirling within me like a storm. The journey had left me with more questions than answers. I never knew the fate of my companion, whether the device they gave me would be enough to change things or if the horrors within were unstoppable. Would those nightmares continue? I didn't know if it was just the facility's darkness seeping into me, or something far larger that I pressed on, the weight of the world heavy on my shoulders. The path ahead was unclear, filled with possibilities both formidable and unknown. I discovered soon enough that I might have escaped that night, but the truth and its lingering shadows would always have a way of following me.